are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to a webinar that we're calling Which RV is Best for You? This is Terry Cooper. I'm with a company called Mobile RV Academy. I also serve as the president of the National RV Inspectors Association, sat on the board for the Texas RV Association for the Education Committee. A lot of different things all related to the RV experience. This afternoon's webinar is being brought to us by Workamper News and with a company that does inspections called RV Inspection. We're going to cover quite a few things today. This is going to be a lengthy process because we've had a lot of questions come in. And what I want to do is introduce you to some of the guests that we have with us, so that way you'll know we have some other folks that will be here. This afternoon, we've got Mr. Anderson with Workamper News. He was kind enough to come on board with us and to be able to help us field some of these questions. So we have Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson, do you have a moment to visit and kind of give any instructions that you might have for the questions that folks might have?
I sure do, Mr. Cooper. I want to welcome everybody. We're glad that you're with us, and we look forward to a very lively event today. And if you have questions, what we're going to do is we're not going to be doing live mic, so that means we won't be asking you to turn your microphone on. On your little control panel, you will see a little basically a little box that you can click where you can actually type in a question. It'll open up a box. If you have a question, you can type that in. It will show up on my screen, and then I'll be fielding those. Some of them, depending on what the questions are, I may just text back to you a response, or we may be reading those loud for you, Mr. Cooper, here as we go along. And I may inject some of those based upon the information that you are covering at that time.
Okay, that would work out real well. Very well. We also have two guests that are going to be joining us. Well, I'd like to introduce them first, and then there's some segments that where it's going to pertain more to what they deal with and what they have dealt with in their own experience. I'd like to kind of give you an idea of what they do. First gentleman we have is Brian Carbonell. Brian, are you on board with us, sir?
I hope so.
Okay, well, that's the main thing. You said you're down in Georgia right now. Is that correct?
Yes, we're just outside of Atlanta.
Okay, very good. And then we have Win Simler. Now, Win, whereabouts are you, sir?
I am in the suburbs of Chicago.
Wow. Isn't technology a great thing? And when I'm looking at the numbers, and folks, there's a bunch of people on this afternoon, so throw your questions to Mr. Anderson so that way he can respond to them, and we'll just get to rocking here. I want you to think about an RV being like a pair of shoes. And if you've ever bought a pair of shoes that, I mean, you just were mad in love with them, and I've been there. I have paid some very high dollars for some very expensive dress shoes that I used to wear with my Hickey Freeman suits and everything when I was a regional manager with one of the large hotel chains. And every time I'd put those shoes on, they would just kill my feet. I mean, they were miserable. And I'd put them in the closet and I'd leave them there for a while. And then one day I said, well, maybe things are different. And I'd put them on and it'd be awful again. Well, sometimes when we buy an RV, the same situation. So, and I know I'm making it very basic, but please understand what we're going to talk about today is some of the things that we as RVers need to be thinking about before we pull the trigger, or maybe some things after we pull the trigger that we need to be doing. I have found that if I were to look across the spectrum as far as RVs, you know, I can't say that there's any one brand that's doing much better than others. Some have a good product line, and then you look at the same brand and maybe have another product that may be struggling a little bit. So to say that one brand is, you know, hey, leave those guys alone, or this other one, everybody needs to buy that one, that's not something we can do, because everyone has a different, unique thing that they want to do with this RV. And I want you to think about how do you see yourself? I mean, what's the dream that you have in this RV experience? And it's amazing to me how many times we do RV shows and people walk up and say, what kind of RV should I buy? And I look at them and I think, you know, I want to answer your question. I want to help any way I can, but I don't know anything about you. I don't know anything about your lifestyle. I don't know what your desires are. I don't know what your bucket list is. I don't know. And so My goal this afternoon is to walk you through some things. Some things you're going to say, oh, I knew that. And some things, if nothing more than we kind of spur the curiosity to where maybe as you're looking about purchasing a unit, or maybe you've already purchased it and you're looking at, okay, how do I maintain this unit? I'm going to give you some information I hope that you can walk away with and say, you know what, I got me a couple of nuggets out of this thing that will do me some good. So with that, let's jump in. I want you to first ask yourself, what's your lifestyle? Because quite honestly, if you take a look at who we are, we really kind of break ourselves down in about these three different groups. If we're going to be involved with the RV experience, we're going to have those that are casuals. Now, this is the largest segment. These are folks that buy an RV and they're looking at it from the standpoint of this is the thing that we're going to build family good times and build some memories, and this is how I escape from that job at 8 to 5 golden handcuffs, that I have to have this job because it pays too well, and if I don't like it, you know, the whole list goes on and on of things that the reason why people are doing it. But usually what happens is a lot of folks will get into this experience and they'll start out with buying the casual unit and they'll graduate up. Now, many of you that have been involved in some of the training that we have done, you know the statistics that we talk about. It has been that if you bought an RV and you enjoyed that lifestyle, you would buy 7 in your lifetime. Well, the demographics are changing a little bit because what we're seeing now is the millennials are coming along, but the boomers are changing the whole segment of the market. Many of us are coming into this market, and we have folks that are hitting us that have never even owned an RV before, and they jump right in the motorhomes and the high-end fifth wheels. So their demand for information is very, very high because they don't want to make a mistake. They have made a big purchase. Now, there's some of you that jump in this experience that, and we see this a lot with some of the boomers, they don't want to sell their brick and stick home. They want to be able to stay close to the kiddos, so maybe they've got grandkids that they're wanting to stay connected with. But what they'll do is they'll go off on journeys, maybe be gone a week, a month, 6 months, and then they'll come back to their brick and stick. So what it is they come back to their home base, but what they're doing is they're enjoying the lifestyle, the freedom that the RV experience gives them. And then there are those of us that are full-time. Now, Lady E and I, we've been on the road coming up on 5 years. And this is our experience. This is our lifestyle. Yes, we still have a house, and for tax reasons, and that's some things we talk about in some of our classes, the domicile and why you need to have a home, why you need to have a business. But all of that all plays into what is the lifestyle that you want? And if you want to live full-time on the road, there's a way to do it. There's a way to take care of a lot of the tax issues. Matter of fact, there's some very good ways that IRS has allowed us to be able to take some deductions if we do it right. But here again, knowing how to do it makes all the difference in the world. Now, ask yourself that lifestyle question. Are you here that you're just saying, hey, I want to travel, I want to see things? We have a lot of folks that say, you know what, I've retired from my job and I'm going to be gone and I'm just going to enjoy it. And usually what happens in about 12 to 18 months, we begin to see them come back and they've seen things, they've done things, and now they're looking for another challenge. They're looking for something else. They don't want to go back to that job that they had before, but they're looking for another sense of adventure. Maybe they have had all the good times. They've done jobs on the road, you know, and taken the vacations and seen the Grand Canyon and the Yellowstone and all these different places. But now they're looking for something different. And then we have that segment of people like the full-time families, that we have families that are living together in an RV with the children, homeschooling them. And like we talk about some of the folks at Full-Time Families, which is an organization out there. If that's something that really tweaks your interest, get a hold of them, Full-Time Families. And they actually have a program that they actually get together from time to time and have little rallies. So that way the kids have a chance to do the socialization, have a chance to see each other and develop friendships. Because I'll tell you, in this experience, if you haven't gotten into it already, let me just share with you, you will develop some very strong friendships and some very strong relationships. Lady E and I have friendships with folks that in many cases I could pick up the phone and call them and they would come to our rescue. They would come and do whatever we need for them to do. But also by the same token, if I say, hey, we're going to be such and such, where are you guys at? It's amazing. We'll meet and go do things. Now, there's many people that are running businesses as they travel. Last week, Lady E and I were in San Antonio, and I was doing some training for a dealership. And in that RV park, probably 60, maybe 75% in that RV park, and this was a very high-end, high-scale RV park. 60 to 75% of those people were living there on a month-by-month basis. Some of them said that, one gentleman I talked to in particular said he'd been there 13 months. He had a government contract with the Air Force, and he was doing some things for them, and he was living full-time in an RV. He said, I'd rather live in my RV, sleep in my own bed, instead of trying to rent an apartment and put up with all the neighbors next door. And you could see out there, these folks had their own little yards and everything. You know, they actually had their little place. Now, I could peek through some of the windows as we would walk, taking our evening walks. You could see through. Some of the folks had, their desks set up on the dining room table. Others had a table set up in the living room. And some even had toy haulers that they looked like they'd converted to offices. So here is an experience that they were having that worked with their lifestyle. And then there's going to be some of you that after you've traveled a little while, you say, you know what, I want to work camp. Now, Mr. Anderson always tells me the definition of a work camper is that if you live in an RV and you have a job, you're classified as a work camper. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that you're working at a campground or you're doing something that's related in the RV experience, but it's the lifestyle of living in this RV and how you deal with that space that you have. So keep that in mind when we start talking about this as far as living full-time in an RV and how it can work for you. Now, the one thing I need you to do is to ask yourself, what are the must-haves? And this is kind of a joke that I play on folks when we do a lot of the RV shows. I ask the question, okay, how many of you guys need bathrooms? And they look at me like, yeah. But folks, there's some folks out there that are a little bit more rustic, want to live off the grid, so they're willing to go out there with the bears, or they want to stay at a campground that maybe has the restroom and shower facilities. So a bathroom is not as critical to them. So the RV that they're going to buy is not going to be as critical that it have all of those amenities. Now, I will say that typically the boomers and the families are going to have, those things. Air conditioning is a big thing, a real big thing, particularly in certain parts of the country. And here in a few moments, I'm going to show you why you need to know how much air conditioning you need. Many of these RVs are built and they only have one air conditioner in them. And unfortunately, one air conditioner in certain parts of the country, Florida, Texas, Arizona, in some of these climates, one air conditioner just will not keep these units cool. And so it's going to require a different type of electrical system, so a different type of an RV in order to handle it. Some of you are going to need work areas like these business people that I was talking about earlier. Right now, Lady E and I, we live in a large fifth wheel. I live in a redwood, and I'm operating this webinar off of the dining room table. I'll turn around and look behind me, and Lady E is setting, we have removed the sofa, and she has her desk set up in the back. That's working for us. Now, our goal is to go eventually into a toy hauler type arrangement, but turn it into an office. Storage compartments, storage areas. I mean, there are boomers that are traveling and they're doing antique shows and bringing things back home, and maybe they've got an antique store that maybe the other family's running. And, you hear all kinds of things. Or people traveling and doing flea markets and things, so they've got to have this storage area. Or maybe they're hauling their toys or their trikes. All of those different things that they want to carry around with them. And then some people say, a washer and dryer, I'll just use the laundromat. Well, I will tell you, in our house, we have a washer and dryer. We lived in a unit for a little over 6 months and a few days, and at first I was really resistant to buying that washer and dryer. But after I made a few trips to the laundromat, because Lady E insisted that I go with her on every trip because it was my decision not to have that washer and dryer, well, guess what? All of a sudden, a washer and dryer seemed very, very important to me because, you know what? I had other things to do with my life other than just sit around and watch the clothes go round and round. So we have a washer and dryer, and it's kind of nice. It's not as big as what one we had in our brick and stick home, but I tell you what, I've never been without underwear, socks, clothes, or any sort. So, it's one of those things where you don't run short, and it's kind of nice to be able to have that device. So for us, that's a big thing. Some of you, and I'm going to include Mr. Anderson in this, have to have an extra vehicle because they travel in a big Class A motorhome. So they've got a tow vehicle behind them, and it's a nice Jeep. And so when they get to where they're going, they uncouple. So some of you, that's going to be an important thing because maybe what you're doing require you to travel. It's going to require you to go and see things, or maybe go and do that job or do that contract. So what I'm trying to set is the tone to get you to thinking about, okay, what about this RV? What's it going to take for me? Now, let's look at the different types. We see in the top left-hand side the travel trailers. There are more travel trailers sold than all of the other categories that we're looking at here combined, almost to the tune of 5 to 1. So can you imagine that many travel trailers being sold? Well, the reason being is because it's a good entry-level vehicle. People can pull it with their Suburban or their pickup, and they can load the kids in it, and then as they get a little older, they sell that unit and buy something else. But the travel trailer is a very solid entry point for a lot of folks. Now, there's some people that prefer to go into the pop-up or the tent trailer. Maybe it was their budget or maybe their lifestyle. They like to rough a little bit more. So, we have that. And then the fifth wheel, the one that you pull with that special connection that looks like a semi that couples up on that hitch that sets directly over the rear axle of your pickup or your truck that you're pulling with. We're seeing a lot of the boomers going into this unit, a lot of the full-time families going into a fifth wheel because it offers a lot more storage space typically, and you also have a lot of space inside. There's some of these units that are being built that have 2 or 3 bedrooms, multiple baths. So, you can get as expensive as you want. And it's just, how big is your pocketbook is really what it boils down to. Now, those are the towables that you pull behind a vehicle. Then we have what we call the Class A motorhome, the Class B motorhome, which is really what I call a good time van. Those of you that grew up, I'm dating myself, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we know what the good time van was. My father said there was no way he would ever let me buy a good time van because I told him, I said, I want to take these girls out on a date, and Dad just didn't see the humor in it. So that never was part of my my vehicles. So basically a Class A is nothing more than when the manufacturer built this unit, they pulled a frame into the manufacturing plant and they built the box over all of it. The Class B is, like I said, a good time van to where they actually tricked out this van, and we've got some really high-end units like the Road Trek, and now we're beginning to see some of the units that are being built on the Sprinter frame chassis, kind of like what you're seeing UPS and Federal Express run around in that have the real tall ceilings. So we're seeing a lot of folks that are buying those units. The thing is that it's amazing what they pack in them, but typically that Class B is geared more towards a single person or maybe a couple. And so, here again, you got to think about, okay, how much room do we need? Because if you've come out of a McMansion that you had 4, 5, 6,000 square feet, and you come into some of these RVs, folks, 430, 450 square feet is not a lot to work with. So your life changes, and you find out real quick if you can live with this person that's your partner, because there's a lot of folks out there that find out real quick that this is not working, and they end up having to come off the road because it's not their lifestyle. Now, the Class C is really just nothing more than a 1-ton truck or about that size that somebody went and whacked it off behind the driver's seat and built a box on the back. And then you can see how the overhang is over the cab. And so this unit is geared here again typically for a couple, maybe that has a pet or two. And so here again, it's kind of tight quarters, but yet it's a very maneuverable unit, much more maneuverable sometimes in certain areas in the Class A. The Class B, that tricked out van, I know a lot of folks that use that even as their second vehicle. So in other words, maybe they bought the Class B to do their RVing, and then they have another vehicle, and when somebody goes to work, they just take the Class B to work, and they just park it in a parking lot where there's room, it's tall enough to get it into. So these are things that at whatever level you're coming into this experience, you have to stop and say, okay, how much longer do I have before I do this experience? How much room do I need? Is what I'm buying going to be long enough? Is it going to be tall enough? Depending on your height and your size, it's going to drive so many things. So I want you to think about that. Now, here's some better pictures of a Class A, and of course you can see the Sprinter van on the right-hand side. We're seeing a lot of those units come in here in the United States. They've been very, very popular because many of them will have that 5-cylinder Mercedes engine in them, and so they're very fuel efficient. And then you see the Class C. Here again, it has its place and it does quite well. I see a lot of families will buy a Class C, and it becomes almost their Suburban. Everybody piles in, and they've got room for everybody to travel, and then you still have a potty, and you still have the refrigerator and all the other stuff. So this is part of the reason why a lot of folks will go motorized. Now, looking at the motorized, let's talk a little bit about some of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because here's what's going to happen to you is you're going to go out and you're going to look at these units if you haven't already purchased one, and you're going to look at price points, because that's typically what we do. We buy many times based on the price, okay, and the maintenance and maybe the insurance, but we've got to know the pros and cons to looking at these units. So if you're going to buy one of these units that has the gasoline engine, you've got to ask yourself, okay, what's the pros and what's the cons on this thing? The two big things you need to look at is, one, if you're going to be using a Class A or a Class C, typically you're going to be wanting to stay more towards the flatland. Not to say that you can't do the mountains, just understand it's not going to have the power that you would expect to see out of one of the diesels, particularly if you're pulling a vehicle behind you. Okay, just keep that in mind. Now, if those are some limitations that you say, hey, you know what, we're not getting in a hurry, then that's okay. But just realize there is a difference in the power that each one of these will give you based upon the drivetrain that's in it. But I want you to keep in mind, banks, insurance companies, consider these gasoline-powered motorhomes, if they have between 75 and 80,000 miles or above, they classify that vehicle as high mileage. Because the status is, and this is what I had a banker tell me one time, said, look, from the day this thing was put on the road, it's had this heavy weight called an RV on its back. So it's basically pulled this RV around its whole life. So it's like towing taking a pickup and towing something the whole time that you have it. That engine's going to have more wear and tear. That transmission's going to have more wear and tear because of what you've put it under. So keep that in mind if you're looking about buying gasoline. Look at the mileage. This is going to be a critical thing for you, okay? Now, if you look at the diesel, yes, you're going to pay a little bit more for it because of the engine that's there and the drivetrain, because most of these big Class A motorhomes are using these Allison transmissions. Now, I'm not saying an Allison transmission is the only way that, the only thing they're using, but many of the manufacturers are using the Allison transmission. I won't say they're bulletproof, but man, the guys that built that thing, they know engines. They know the transmissions. They're going to be coupled up to those engines. And typically, you're going to see a little bit higher maintenance costs. Oil changes are going to cost you a little bit more. But you know what? For what you get, and you look at the longevity of that engine, look at the mileage. They don't even start getting high mileage to get 500,000 miles on these things if they're maintained and taken care of. And typically, they give you a much better ride. They give you a much better pull in the mountains. And again, when you get ready to sell it, typically you have a higher resale value. So there's some things to weigh here, okay? And we're going to look at this here in just a little bit about buying used versus new. And so it may be that you might look at buying a used diesel, something that's 2, 3, 4 years old, and have all the bells and whistles that you're looking for basically the same amount of money that you maybe buy new gasoline. So keep that in mind when you're out there looking, okay? Now the towables, there's your tent trailer, your little pop-up, depending on what part of the country you're in, what they call it. Like I say, Lady E, she and her daughter, 2 dogs, and I think a cat or 2 lived in a tent trailer for a period of time in her life before she and I got together, and she became the love of my life. But the thing is that I admire the woman that she could pull that off, because if you're going to live full time in it, that's to me that's a little rustic, but they did, and they made it work. And then you see the travel trailer on the right. Now remember, that's the most common unit that you will see. That's the most common travel trailer, is the one that you'll see more people buy anything else. And then you got your luxury fifth wheels. This is where the boomers are going, because it's amazing how people make the decision, either I'm going to go motorized or I'm going to go towable. And usually if they go towable, they're going to go a high-end luxury unit. If they go motorized, then they're probably going to go one of the A, B, or C's. And then I want you to notice what has become the most popular style across all age groups. It's the toy hauler. And they have toy haulers that are mounted on the back of fifth wheels. They have toy haulers that are part of a motorhome, travel trailers. So there's all kinds of different configurations that have that garage. And part of it is for, like we're looking at right here, somebody's wanting to haul their smart car and they don't want to pull it behind them. So what we find is that is one of the most multi-purpose purpose vehicles that we're seeing out there. If you go to these RV shows, that's what you're going to see. Nearly every brand is carrying a toy hauler unit. Some go more racy looking, you know, they have the decals, and you know, Lady E doesn't get excited about all the chrome and the racing decals on the side like some of us do. She wants something that looks more like the interior, the living quarters look like. So, you know, here again, it's your lifestyle. What are you looking for? But like I say, that toy hauler seems to be the thing that crosses all age groups and all lifestyles. Now, let me burst some bubbles here. I am always amazed how many people will take a vehicle that they have and somebody will tell them, oh, no problem, you just put airbags on it and it can support it. And it may be. The airbags on that rear suspension may handle that. But the big question you've got to ask yourself, if you need to stop that thing in a hurry, not only do you have the pickup that's pulling it, but by golly, you've got that vehicle strapped on the back end of you. How do you shut that thing down? And I have seen some situations. As a matter of fact, this week, I saw a couple pull out of this RV park, and it was a half-ton pickup pulling a travel trailer, and the chains were dipping. I mean, the chains were dragging on the asphalt as they pulled out because they needed stabilization, and they needed to be able to also equalize that load, weight distribution, because what was happening was that truck did not have the rear end suspension to handle the trailer. So I know what was going to happen. These people were going to have blowouts on the front tires, the front axles, because most of the weight was sitting on those front axles. And then they have some semi run by them, and that semi is going to cause them to do a little tail whip. Next thing you know, they're going to end up in the ditch or flipped over. So my point is this, folks, buy more truck than you need, because when you need it, it's not a good time. That's what I call a very high pucker factor. If all of a sudden you top the hill and you see nothing but red lights, brake lights looking at you, and you need to shut that thing down, and you've got 15, 18, 20,000 pounds shoving you around, if you've got airbags, yeah, it may be straight, but the brakes on that thing is going to shove that truck around. I mean, the weight is going to take you and move you around. Because on a travel trailer, 10 to 15% of the weight of that vehicle is on the hitch. On the fifth wheel, 20 to 25% is typically what is over that rear wheel of that coupling mechanism. And so what happens is when the manufacturer builds these units, and they say, okay, this is a 18,000 gross vehicle weight, 18,000 pound gross vehicle weight unit, and you look underneath there and they've got two 8,000 pound axles. You say, wait a minute, there's only six, whoa, this is 18,000 pound trailer, and I got 8,000 plus 8,000, that's only 16, so where's the other 2,000 being carried? It's being carried by the truck. And the thing about it is that truck is not geared, it's not made to handle that higher weight over its rear axle. Then all of a sudden we throw things out of balance. And I'm just saying this, and let me just tell you from my life, I know this from experience. I have had 3 trailers come loose in my life. None of them were pleasant. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but it sure scared the heebie-jeebies out of us because I was young, didn't know any better, and until you get a little older and you have a little experience to where you had some close calls, you can't appreciate underpowered and underweight does to you. So I don't mean to preach. I'm just saying if you're going to do this experience, upgrade and get the right hitch. And here again, if you're buying a rig that says it weighs 16,000 pounds, don't buy a hitch that's just 16,000. Buy something that's 18 or 20,000 because there's chances are you're going to upgrade to another vehicle. And if you do that, you've got a hitch that can handle the 16,000, but also when you upgrade to that new rig, you don't have to go and buy a new hitch to put in your truck. And typically for another 100, 150 bucks, you can upgrade from say 16,000 to 18,000 without any problem. So keep that in mind when you're out there shopping, okay? Now, let's look at some of the construction type, because I have a lot of folks asking, well, how do you know the difference in the prices? Folks, you get what you pay for. I mean, it's really very simple. And now, up in the top 2 pictures, this is what we call stick and tin. Now, this is typically what most of your travel trailers are made out of, the metal ones that got the corrugated outside. That's typically how they're made. What they will do is they will take a 2x4 and they will rip it, and that becomes the studs. That comes the corner post for the studs. Then for many of the sidewall studs, they will take a 1x4 and rip it. So now you've got a 1x2, actually 3/4 by about 1 3/4. That is your stud. But the thing about these units is that the way they're built, the cabinets on the inside walls, all of that is tying this thing together, giving it the integrity to hold. And then when they hang the sheet metal on the outside, that dresses it up, but it also gives it strength as well. So when they say, you know, I can buy this one right here, it's got the metal siding for this price point, but man, they want so much more to buy this hard side. Well, folks, it's the construction technique that they're using. And those are things to keep in mind, okay? Now, then the other thing is we have what we call the solid shell sidewalls. And most of us know what an Airstream is. If you've been around the RV experience, you know that Wally Bynum and his people have had these things out here for years and years and years. And, you know, an Airstream buyer is a very unique individual because they buy for all kinds of reasons, but usually it's because they want to make an investment in this thing and they want something that'll stay together. And they're buying it typically for longevity. Keep in mind, though, that Airstreams do not typically have slide-out rooms in them. Now, there was a period of time they tried to build some, and they had a little water intrusion issues. But if you go to an RV dealership or you go to an RV rally, go to an RV show, you typically, if you look at these Airstreams, they will not have slide-out. So the size of that unit, when you look at it, when it's pulling behind that vehicle, it's going to be the same size as it is when it's parked inside that RV park. There are no walls that are moving out and expanding. Same thing with the little fiberglass units. You know, there's different brands out there. You know, one that comes to mind because there's one made not too far from where we are right now, the little casitas, and you know, they're fiberglass. Here again, it's a very specialized type unit, well built, just like the Airstreams are. Now, what we're seeing in most of the motorhomes and the high-end units, and even some of the travel trailers that get up past what we call the stick and tin line, they go to what we call a bonded laminated sidewall. Now, if you notice in this picture on the right-hand side, this is the cross-cut of a sidewall. Now, what they've got on the right-hand side, you see that small, thin paneling. That's the interior paneling. That's the decor that's inside an RV. You'll have the styrofoam. And then depending on the manufacturer, they may have 1, 2, or maybe even 3 layers of what we call Luan paneling on the outside, and then they will coat it with a fiberglass gel coat. And they have different techniques, different styles, or different types of fiberglass work that they'll do on the outside sheet. And what happens is this is glued together. They either put it in a vacuum and pull it down together tight, or they run it through a pinch roller. And when it comes out, that 40 or 45-foot piece wall, like what's on this top picture here, that is about as rigid and stiff as you can get. Now, what they will do typically is they will outline the thing with aluminum tubing, and then they will put vertical studs around the doors and windows, but they won't build these like we were used to seeing with a brick and stick house where we have a stud in there every 16 to 24 inches. You may go 3 or 4 feet before you see you know, where they have installed an aluminum stud in there. And I tell a lot of people, if you want to know how and where your studs are on the inside of your walls, wait for a good cool morning where you have a little moisture outside and watch the condensation on the side of your rig. You'll see where that aluminum is. It'll just stand out at you because you'll see the hot spot, so to speak. In other words, where the aluminum is behind that fiberglass, behind that Luan paneling, will not be having that moisture from the condensation. But like I say, bonded laminated. Now, the drawback that we have with bonded laminated walls is that we've got to keep the water intrusion from coming in. And by that I mean around the windows and doors. And we have a lot of folks that are pulling out their awnings. Now, please listen carefully because this is destruction in the making. A lot of folks will take their awning and pull it out, and then they take these straps and tie it on the end and secure it. So now they treat that as a patio cover. Well, what happens is we get these high winds that come through, or just nice little gusts that come up sometimes on an evening just before the sun goes down. And what happens is those straps are holding the front of that awning, that roller, that aluminum tube that the awning's attached to. It's holding it, not allowing it to move. So all of that energy that's being applied to that awning, that sail effect that we have, is tugging on the trim that's holding that awning to the sidewall. And then what happens is that trim, we call it C-molding, that trim is attached to, is screwed into the outside wall. And what happens is when that wind goes to tugging on that awning, what it does is it starts pulling those screws out, and now water gets in behind that C-channel and goes into those screw holes and begins to start delaminating, causing that Luan paneling, the layers to start coming apart. You know, we've all seen what plywood looks like when it gets wet, how the layers start peeling apart, and that's what happens here. So that's so critical that some of the maintenance that we need to be doing, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but point being is, just remember, this, while it is a nice unit, it does require maintenance. It's not a maintenance-free item at all, by any stretch of the imagination. Now, before you go to make your purchase, okay, we've talked about some of the different things. You're out here looking at it. You say, okay, we're ready to go pull the trigger. And I see a lot of folks come to the RV shows, and the family comes. It's a weekend adventure. We're going to go. You need to know what your budget is. Lady E and I had a lady come up one Sunday morning, and she was boo-hooing. She and her husband had bought this unit. They had agreed to it, signed the paperwork, and they were on the hook for it. And she come back and said, how do I get out of this? I put down a deposit, and I've run the numbers. We can't even make the payments on this thing. I mean, what do you tell somebody like that? And we were lucky. I just told her, I said, who did you buy it from? Or who did you do your deal with? She told us, and I said, ask for this gentleman right here. He's the owner. Explain your situation, and I know the man to be an honest man and will take care of you. And I believe I understood later that he did. He refunded it. But folks, that's not always the case. There's a, you know, those of you that play poker know what I'm talking about. A card laid is a card played. And sometimes if you put down a deposit and you back up, you lose it. And some states are a little more stringent about that than others. Some of them give you a cooling off period, and some of you don't. You got to know what you're looking for. Are you looking for motorized? Looking for towables? What kind of towable? You know, is 22 feet going to be big enough for you? Or is it going to be too small? I don't know. I had a gentleman send a question to ask that. You know, I have my wife and myself, and we have a dog, and we have 22 feet. Is that going to be big enough? Wow, that's a tough question to answer because I don't know their lifestyle. I don't know what they're going to do. It could very well be perfect for them. Perfect. But then what if it's not? So you need to go into this thing with your eyes open, knowing exactly what you're looking at. You got to decide, okay, do we want to go new? Because there's some advantages new, and we'll look at that in just a minute. But there's also some disadvantages, you know, price sometimes and that sort of thing. Or do you go used? And I know people that say, you know, I only buy used. I buy something that's 3 or 4 years old because of depreciation, and I can still get all my bells and whistles. Keep those emotions in check. Had a banker call me one time and told me he was going to be loaning money to a lady, and all she could tell him about this motorhome she was wanting to buy was it had pretty curtains, and he was wanting an inspection on it. And you know, he was looking out for her because he knew that she was buying in the emotion. And he, like he told me, he said, she's going to be taking this thing and going out to California to visit one of her relatives. And he said, the last thing I want to do is loan her money on this thing, and I have to go and retrieve my collateral because she flies home because she said it broke down. Well, you need to know what the condition of that unit's at. The other thing is take your tools with you. Now, people laugh at me, but I'm telling you, I have watched Lady E pull that measuring tape out of her purse, and she starts measuring things, measuring cabinets, measuring drawers, and I'll see her shake her head. Nope, it's not big enough. And, you know, when you look at some of these drawers, and you look at some of these RVs at the RV shows and set up in the displays, it looks wonderful until you put your stuff in, and all of a sudden it gets really, really claustrophobic in there, you know? And you have to ask yourself, okay, where am I going to put the coffee pot? Where am I going to put this? You know, what drawers am I going to put my silverware in? Because some of these drawers are not deep enough to handle your knives and your spoons, you know, your wooden spoons and all the things that you're going to be doing. So that's why I say take you a measuring tape, open all of the cabinet doors. And gentlemen, You get yourself in that shower and you stand up in that shower and make sure that you're not bumping your head on the ceiling. You know, sit down on that toilet, folks. Make sure that you're not feeling like you're wedged in a sardine can. Make sure it fits for you, because we're all built differently and we need to make sure that what we're buying is going to work for us. And I always tell everybody, take you a can of pork and beans, or at least the empty can, and a box of Cheerios or whatever the cereal of the day is that the kids, let you have the box of. Take those with you and see if they fit in the cabinets. Because folks, let me just tell you, it's very disappointing when you start loading those shelves up and you realize that your cereal won't fit in it. You have to turn everything sideways. Or when you come in from the grocery store, you got to go find your Tupperware bowl so you can empty the cereal box and dump it in there so you can snap the lid on and get it to fit in the, that's one of those hassle factors that you don't need. And that's why I say, what kind of RV are you looking at buying? Make sure you get the one that works for you. Now, some of you that are into TV dinners, hey, you got to have that big freezer. So these are the kind of things, the big refrigerator. Some of you are going to say, hey, I need that house type refrigerator. Or, no, I don't need that big 4-door refrigerator. I need, these are things you've got to ask yourself. And here again, no deposit. Sleep on this thing. Sleep on it. If it was there today, it's going to be there tomorrow. And if they sell the one that you were looking at, they have built others of them. Typically, most production manufacturers run these things in a cluster, usually a minimum of 8 RVs of the same style, layout, and everything, because in their production. And many of them run 15 or 20 or 30 in a production run. So they got all kinds of twins that are coming off that production line at the same time. Buying new, it's interesting to listen to the dialogue of folks around campfires, and they'll talk about why they justify why they bought what they did. Because we buy on emotion. I know we do. I bought a 1-ton pickup out here, and I bought it on emotion. But I had done my homework, and I knew what I was looking for. So I knew I needed certain features and options in that truck. Okay? Lady E explained it to me in a way that I understood, that we needed to make sure we had heated seats. So guess what? That truck has heated seats on those cold, cold mornings. So by golly, that's what we wanted, because that's what she wanted, okay? Many of you can order your bells and whistles, if you need a specific thing. And some of these manufacturers will include things or delete certain things. They just need to know. Granted, if you're special ordering, you're going to have a little wait time, because they got to put it in the production line. You have a factory warranty. Now, that is an advantage over a used unit. The only people that can give you a factory warranty is the manufacturer. Now, people say, well, I got a new warranty. I got an extended warranty on it. Folks, an extended warranty is really called an extended service agreement, and it's only going to cover certain things like the appliances, the running gear. They spell it out in their policy, very much so, but it's not going to be that bumper to bumper that you get with a factory. Typically, if a factory extends the warranty on a vehicle, it's because they're going the extra mile to show that they are doing everything in their power to keep that vehicle from becoming a lemon. Sometimes a customer buys a unit, has a few problems with it, and then they come back and say, I want you to buy this thing back. And the factory said, no, we'll take care of this because we committed to it. That's what our warranty says. But in good faith, we will give you another 3 months, another 6 months. I've even heard in some extreme cases give an additional year. But what the manufacturer's doing is they're saying, look, we believe so strongly in our product, we'll back it up. And not only that, if we ever have to get in front of a judge, we can say, Judge, we went with these people. So all of a sudden now, when we, the buyers, trying to present our case, we don't have the foot to stand on we used to. Okay, so keep that in mind. Pre-delivery inspection. Now that's where they're going to do the walkthrough with you. And I do a lot of dealer training, folks. And, I look at the list here, and I think we've got some dealers on the line with us this afternoon. I'm just going to tell you, when you go to buy this unit, before you stroke that check, before you sign that contract, you tell them how much time that you need for somebody to show you how it works. Typically, you should have at least 3 to 4 hours to go through that unit minimum. Don't let a 15-minute walkthrough work, because you will wake up the next day and won't remember half of what somebody showed you. Besides, when you're doing the pre-delivery inspection, you're doing the walkthrough with this thing, have them step back and walk you through it and let you operate the buttons, let you open things, let you do it. There's something about us humans, the more that we engage ourselves, the easier it is for us and the more that we remember. Now, I recommend that you take you a partner. Have you somebody that has the clipboard, the PDI sheet, so that way they're working and checking it off with you. Take that camera, take pictures, ask questions. Do not allow them to rush you. Because what happens many times is they've got maybe 4 or 5 units to deliver today, and that one poor guy, he's trying to get these things out and get all these customers taken care of. But you know what, folks? This sounds mean, but right now, you're the most important customer that they've got, and they need to take care of you. And I say that from a consumer standpoint because when Lady E and I get a new trailer, she knows, they'll tell us, oh, we've already done the PDI. She said, well, he's a master certified tech. He's going to do a PDI on it. And it's kind of like, you can see them roll their eyes. But you know what, folks? There's things that you will find, things that you will see, questions you will have that you will only get answered if you have somebody standing there with you that knows the product. If they don't know the product, then it might be that you need to find somebody there at the shop that can walk you through it, because don't be in a hurry. You've stroked some big checks to buy this thing, okay? So when you do that walkthrough, that show out, make sure that you've got somebody going through it with you, because they're going to have you sign that PDI sheet that they send back to the factory to kick in your warranty. You don't want to just stroke that thing, say, yeah, it all works, when you get out there and then find out maybe 1 or 2 things didn't work. And then all of a sudden, when you come back for warranty, well, it showed that it was working when you bought it. What do you mean that you have a problem with it 6 months from now? And so these are things to keep in mind. Depreciation is a big, big issue. Make no mistake, folks, this is like an automobile. When you drive it off the lot, it decreases in value. I know you don't want to hear that. I hear people say, oh, this is my RV and this is my investment. Folks, I hate to burst their bubble. It's not an investment. Now, if you're going to be using it for business, then it's a write-off. It's an expense that you can take care of on your taxes many times based on what your attorney's telling you in your situation. But just realize, there is depreciation, and you take the biggest hit in the first 2 years. And so that's why you see a lot of folks are buying units that are used. That's the reason why a lot of folks buy a vehicle, a car, an automobile that just come in off of a 36-month lease, because they know that they can pick that thing up for a lot less than they could with a new one. And so this is the same thing. Now, why do I have 5 years? Because usually in 5 to 7 years, you begin to start having things that need a little bit more replacement. Things like hoses and belts and lines, oil lines, and things like that. And on the travel trailers and fifth wheels, propane detectors and propane regulators and stuff, they only have a 5-year life on them. So when you buy used, you're going to have to make preparations sometimes to do a little replacement and upgrade. So keep that in mind when you look at this depreciation. It's a sweetheart way to go, but you just got to buy right. And that's the key right there. You've got to buy it right. Now, those of you that are looking at some units that are over 10 years old, spoiler alert here, let me just tell you, many institutions will not loan money if it's over 10 years old. I saw a guy the other day that was trying to buy something that was 12 years old, and the extended service agreement company wouldn't even touch him. So not only would the lending institutions wouldn't touch him, but so would the situation with the extended service agreement people. So just keep that in mind. I mean, there's some really, really good deals on some units that are 10 years old. Maybe don't have a lot of mileage on them, say like some of these motorhomes. But you got to realize the seals, the gaskets, hoses, the belts, all those things, have got some age on them. And just the natural age will cause them to deteriorate. And if you're paying cash for it, hey, you might get a smoking deal. But just remember, you've got a little bit higher maintenance cost on the front end getting this thing up to where it needs to be. And part of the reason why this next point is here is because, folks, we have seen over and over again when we do these inspections, issues that folks did not know were there that the inspector found. So please get you an inspection. And motorhomes, please, and I beg with everything in me, please get the fluid analysis. Tom Johnson with JG Lubricant, the guy that provides our fluid analysis and runs the labs that they have 3 across the country. He has those guys check the fluids. You know, when we looked at last year, 2015, last year we had, I believe Tom told me, we had 32% of the motorhomes, the motorized units that we sampled their oil, had something wrong with the engines. 32%. Now, Tom went ahead and qualified it. And he said, now, Cooper, he said it could have been that maybe the fuel injectors were hanging up and we were spraying a little bit too much fuel in there and diluting the oil. But what's that do to the lubrication capability of that oil? It dilutes it. But he said, let me just tell you, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got some of these units out here that you guys sent us samples that we found bearing material, piston material. So that engine's coming apart and people don't even know it. Maybe the seller doesn't even know it, but you find it in this fluid analysis because it's a blood test. Now, we're also finding on some of these gasoline engines, like the Class A's and the Class C's that we've been seeing, that the transmissions, because a lot of folks are taking these things up in the mountains and really working that transmission, pulling a very heavy vehicle behind them, towing it behind them, and that transmission is shifting and it's working. And we're finding that when we pull the fluid samples on that transmission, what we're finding is that transmission is coming apart or the fluid is burnt. Now, we had one lady that when they went to pull the sample on the fluid, the inspector told me, he said, Cooper, I didn't know if I was going to get any fluid out there. He said, what I was pulling was chunks. And he said, you know, she looked at it and, well, she didn't buy it because the results told her everything she needed, but I think she'd already made up her mind she wasn't going to buy it. Now, she called us about 2 weeks later and she said, I found you one. We went and did the samples on it, did the inspection on it, and she said, that's the one because the results came back. But she saved her from buying a money pit. And so if you need somebody to look at this thing for you that's not emotionally attached to it. And that's the key thing. And those of you that, you know, are buying a used unit, take a look at those extended service agreement companies because there's some pretty good deals on them, particularly if you're somebody that's maybe not as handy as you'd like to be. And maybe it'd be nice to have somebody to come get you off the side of the road because a lot of these extended service agreement companies have roadside assistance. So these are things to be taking a look at when you're looking at buying these units. And I can't say this enough, and a part of it because RV Inspection Connection is sponsoring us tonight, but folks, after you sit around and hear some of the stories, the horror stories that people bought, after you've seen some of the inspection reports that I've seen where you knew that somebody was scamming somebody because you saw the report and put the pressure on this person to hurry up and send me $10,000 deposit. So somebody else is wanting this unit. Come quick. You got to fly out here and pick this thing up. And then when they get the report, it's a piece of junk. The guy's put decals over holes, and he won't even let them hook it up to water or electricity, and certainly won't let them do a gas pressure leak test because this thing's a piece of junk. And like the lady told us, she said, that was the best $395 I ever spent. She said, because I was going to give that man $10,000. Do you think I'd gotten my money back? Because she said the photos that he was sending her were not the same photos that we sent her, even though the VIN number was the same. So obviously we knew the guy was pulling a scam on her. So here she was in California, this guy's in Florida, and he was trying to put the screws to her. And, you know, obviously that's the way he operated. But once you buy it and that guy disappears, you're hosed. Now, we can get inspections done. We've got inspectors, certified inspectors, and I'll just say this without belaboring the point, just check out RV Inspection Connection. Talk to them. They'll coach you through it, let you look at it. And see what can be done. You know, there's different price points there for you, okay? And the thing about it is that these guys have to abide by a code of ethics because they are all NRVIA inspectors. They're certified by the National RV Inspectors Association. They have a code of ethics. Here's one of the things that I'm serving as the president, so that's really why it's a big thing for me, is that if an inspector looks at a unit today, he is not permitted to work on that thing for 1 year. And so these guys that are running these mobile services, several of them came to us and wanted to be inspectors. Well, as long as we spell it out for them, guys, now you realize you can't build your business off of this. Well, what do you mean? I'm going to find these things and I can repair them for them and I'll help them. And like we tell them, but how much integrity do we have? Are you sure that you're clean. I mean, what if the question comes up, was it really broke? How are you going to defend yourself? Well, you just said it was good, but yet now you're telling me it needs to be repaired. So these are things that we see over and over again that we just want to make sure that there's an unbiased third party, okay? So get your walkthrough, and I'm telling you, a good dealer understands, and I know some of the dealerships that'll say, look, we have an RV park attached to our facility here. All you got to do is you're going to stay here a day or two, and we're going to walk you through it. If you have any problems, we'll come help, or we'll take care of it. And I've had others that say, okay, here's your coupon for a free night to stay at this campground. They're going to walk you through it. If you have any problems, give me a call. And so, you want to be close to home on your maiden voyage, because if you have problems with this thing, the last thing you want to do is to run the risk of tearing up your marriage with frustration, because we say things when we're tired, we're angry, we're upset, and the person that's closest to us that we care the most about, we strike out at. That's not the person we need to be doing that with. The thing to do is to lock the door, turn off the lights, turn off the water, get in your vehicle, and go home and sleep in your bed, and come back tomorrow when you're refreshed, and then approach whatever the situation was. The relationship is worth more than that. And like I say, get a home inspection on that thing. Educate yourself. Now, I don't care if you're buying new or you're buying used. Educate yourself, because education causes fear to dissipate. If you're there, you're not afraid of it. Because, folks, I'm going to tell you, and I've seen this over and over again. I've been doing this. I started out on the production line with Skyline Manufacturing, building units in 1972. So I've built them, I've worked on them, I've managed the service departments. And let me just tell you, 80% of the things that go wrong with these things are things that you and me can work on. We can fix, because it's easy to access, easy to fix. But we just got to have somebody show us how. And that's what I want to make sure that you're given some opportunity to be able to work on it yourself, okay? Now, I want to bring Brian on board with us. Brian, are you still with us, sir?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Now, guys, I want you to know I'm picking at him because this is a newlywed right here, and that's why he's wearing the Mickey Mouse hat. Now, you guys said you got married at Disneyland?
Disney World.
Or Disney World in Florida. So I had to pick at him a little bit. Okay, Brian, what is your background? What did you do before you got into the full-time experience?
I worked for a Canada's public broadcaster, basically as a facilities coordinator and a web geek. Basically, I sat in front of a computer for 8 hours a day.
I did not know that. So you weren't a super tech then?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, here again, I can't believe that I couldn't remember, because I was kicking myself this afternoon when I was putting this together. I'm thinking, what did he do beforehand? So share with us what we're looking at here, and what happened, and how you got to where you could do this yourself from what you had been doing before you got into the RV experience.
Sure. What you're looking at is pictures of the gearing in my front landing legs. We were leaving southern Florida, and we were all hooked up. Last step was to bring up the landing gear, and about halfway up, the gears all started making those wonderful noises that gears make that you never ever want to hear. It was let's just say there was a few words that were said that weren't good for public consumption.
Okay. What did you have anybody tell you what it was going to cost to have it repaired? Did anybody quote you a price?
No. What we did is we were actually on our way to Tampa, Florida, to visit friends that were actually teaching a course at Lazy Days up there.
Okay.
So we got the gear up high enough so that we could actually make it there and have the folks at Lazy Days look at it, or at least help us out, figure out what we needed. This happened on the Thursday before the long weekend, the Easter long weekend. So we arrived there. Yeah. We arrived at Lazy Days, kind of lunchtime, the Thursday before Good Friday.
Great.
know,
You're
you
the
know,
customers I used to hate.
I'll give them credit. They helped me the best they could, and basically told me that the earliest they could get parts for us was Wednesday, which would have been, I guess, yesterday. So we would have been stuck down in Tampa for an extra week that we hadn't planned. We already had a campsite booked further up in Georgia.
Okay.
So
how did this come about? I mean, how did the outcome come? How did it go?
What I did is, we talked to them. I talked to the manufacturer, ordered a set of gears from Lippert. We actually ordered it from Amazon. The only gears that Lippert offers. Went to install them. They didn't fit. Long story short, I ended up having to replace the entire landing leg because the gear package they don't make a replacement gear package. So I now have one whole new landing leg.
Okay. So how did you know what to do? I mean, obviously, if you were broadcasting, that's a little different than taking landing legs off RVs.
Yeah. Last July, I actually took the training triad in Shipshewana.
Of course, we're going to talk about it. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. And that, the information that I got from that, it gave me the confidence to know, okay, logically work through the steps and realize that this stuff, it's not rocket science. It's, if you're the least bit handy, you can actually do this stuff. It gave me the confidence to know that I'm not going to break my house. We've been full timing for 3 years, so this is our house. And the last thing that I wanted to do was make it worse and have my new bride not very happy with me.
Okay. How long did it take you to change them out?
All told,
once you got the part?
Once I got the part, that day, once I got the new landing leg, it was about an hour, but I'd already had the other leg out. So I'd say all told probably about 2 hours at the most.
Okay. Do you remember the rate that you were quoted for the hourly rate to do the repair?
No, but I'm sure it was upwards of, $110, $115 an hour.
Yeah, that's pretty standard because I'm seeing here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area up around $120 to $150 an hour. So, here again, it's that thing. Okay. Brian, thank you. And tell Trish I hope you guys do well, you and Mickey and Mizzy. So press on, my friend, press on. Thank you for being on board with us. Folks, what he's showing you here is something that you can do yourself. Now, I'm here to tell you, I never really enjoyed all this kind of stuff, but sometimes, you have to make a decision. Am I going to pay somebody else to do it and wait till they can get to me, or can I go do it myself? And the thing is if the fear is evaporated, you're not afraid. You can say, okay, let's look at this thing. It comes apart, you can put it back together, and obviously that's what he did. And so, Brian, thank you, sir, for that. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Now, our next gentleman is Win Simler. Now, guys, I had to put this picture up there because I thought, man, is this a guy that's living easy right now? But Win, are you with us? I want to talk to you about your refrigerator. He's got a Norcold refrigerator here that had a little issue, and I'll just let him share what he encountered. And what did you do before you got to being the Joe Cool sunglass guy?
I was one of those nasty C-level executives for most of my career. I was the chief information officer for an electronics company.
Really? Okay. Okay. All right. So tell me what happened here, because you told me this, but I had never seen your pictures till you sent them to me this afternoon.
Yeah, well, we were down, Joanne and I were down, this happened just a few weeks ago, actually, at the beginning of February. We were down in New Orleans, and we were there during that time. Some of those nasty storms came through. I think there was a couple of tornadoes in and around New Orleans that really devastated one or two RV parks, fortunately not the one we were in. And we happened to be downtown just shopping around in downtown New Orleans during the day. And when we came back to the motorhome, we were in a Class A motorhome. When we came back, we walked in and we heard a beeping noise. We didn't know what that beeping noise was, and we just kind of slowly walked around, and we recognized that it was coming from the refrigerator. And I took a look at the refrigerator, and there was an error code flashing in addition to the beeping. So I wrote down the error code, and I then got on my smartphone and did a quick Google search. This happens to be a Norcold refrigerator, so I did a Google search of what the error code was, and I found out that it was the high temperature limit switch. So I took a look outside, and sure enough, and you can see this picture, the little red light in the upper left-hand corner is that limit switch, and when that happens, that's not a good thing with the Norcold refrigerator. So I wasn't really sure what to do, so I called a good friend of mine who happens to be known as the professor, and I said, here's what I got. You got any suggestions for me? And he said, well, you can try a big heavy magnet and see if it pulls that switch back out, because it seemed like the switch was triggered by some moisture getting into the because the winds were blowing pretty heavy and there was a lot of rain, and I think there was some moisture that got in that triggered that switch, but I don't know that for a fact. Anyway, we tried the heavy magnet, and that didn't do it. So decided that we better try just taking the wires and jump them so that we could get the refrigerator to work, because I didn't want the refrigerator to not work and we would lose all of the food that we had in the refrigerator. So I took a 5 amp fuse and I disconnected, you can see some wires there in the upper left hand corner of that switch, disconnected those wires, the input 12 volt and the output 12 volt from that switch, and hooked them up to a 5 volt fuse, and that completed the circuit. And as soon as that happened, the refrigerator started working again. So then the next task was to find somebody that could replace that switch for me. I called somebody in New Orleans, and they said they had the switch and that he would get back to me, and he never did. Well, we were we didn't want to be staying in New Orleans. We already had some reservations in Alabama, so I found a place in Alabama that Norcold could send the switch to, and when they got the switch there, I went to the service department there, and they replaced it. And it was a warranty, not a warranty item, but it's a safety item from Norcold. They have recalls on them, and it was a no charge replacement other than a minor labor charge that the service provider charged me for installing the switch. They said that it wasn't something that I as a user should attempt myself, because there's more involved than just replacing that little switch. And it did take about an hour to an hour and a half for the service technician to do the replacement, because you have to actually go in behind the unit over here on the far right side and do some work there as well. So it's a fairly complex procedure, and one that a trained person needs to do.
So, folks, there's some things that we can do, and then there's some things that, we get ourselves out of trouble, but as soon as we can get some help, then that's what we can do. So what you're looking at here in this situation, because that recall kit is a life safety issue, you don't want to play with that stuff. So what he did was, obviously he did the right thing, had Norcold have that temperature switch, because that recall component there is monitoring the temperature to make sure that thing doesn't give any problem. Folks, I hate to tell you this, but RV refrigerators are the biggest cause for fires in RVs, and so that recall kit, that's why it's so critical. So when he and I talked on the phone, it's like, okay, let's try this first, see if we can get it to reset. And when it didn't, then his recourse is to get some support from Norcold. And so when I take my hat off to you, fella, that was good, So I bet, did Joanne think you were a hero when you pulled that one off?
Well, she was impressed.
Well, folks, I'm going to go ahead and tell on him. He and I have already worked on an awning, and I've already seen that this guy's handy. He can make it happen. But, I want to make sure that everybody saw that there's some things we can do, like change out landing legs and do other things, and there's some things that once we get to a certain point, maybe we need to turn it over to somebody that has a little bit more parts and maybe some expertise.
Well, the big thing.
Go ahead.
Just
Please.
one last thing I wanted to say was the big thing was that I was able, because of the training that I've had, I was able to diagnose what the problem was and where it was coming from. And in this particular case, I couldn't completely do all of the work, but I was certainly able to zero in on what the cause was, and that would have been something I never would have been able to do before. I would have had to call in a service tech to come out to the motorhome where we were staying and help me diagnose what the problem was, which could have taken a long time. So it just saved a lot of time on my part, and really some expense as well.
That's true. That's so true. Well, congratulations. Brian, Wynn, I appreciate you guys being on board with us this afternoon and just kind of sharing. Because, folks, you need to know that there's things that you can do. You're not out there helpless. And we got a term that we call the purple monkey. And this is what happens to many of us. And what you've heard these guys both say, that they basically thumped that purple monkey off their shoulder and said, shut up, I can do this. Because that purple monkey is basically, you see in the movies where you hear those chimpanzees and those monkeys just screaming and, acting up. Well, that's really what happens. Our emotions, that little self-speak voice in our head is talking to us and telling us all these horrible things. This is bad. This is horrible. This is going to be very, very expensive. And so with that being said, if you have a little education, if you have a little knowledge, it goes away. And that's the reason why I shared in the very front end. Get some knowledge so that way when you're living this RV lifestyle, it doesn't scare you. Yeah, you'd be frustrated with it from time to time because Lady E looks at me and said, what's wrong? I said, well, honey, this is frustrating. But you know what? You just buck it up and you say, okay, monkey, get off the shoulder. Let's step back and look what's really going on here. Now, let's take a look at some things, and I want to make sure before you leave this afternoon that you have some things just some new knowledge to take with you, okay? Because to me, if I have a little more knowledge, I feel like, okay, I can go do this, And I want you to understand, this is just a standard block of any RV. Every RV out there has 3 separate electrical systems. And that's some of the things that we talk about in the maintenance class, the training triad that these two guys were talking about. There are 3 electrical systems. One of them, of course, runs all the tail lights, the headlights, and the blinkers and all that stuff. The other, of course, is the 120 volts that runs the air conditioner and some of the other appliances, the ceiling fans, the microwave, and that sort of thing. And then we have a device called the converter. Now, converter is just really a fancy battery charger, and it's going to take that 120 volts and make 12 volts, run into a fuse panel, and we're going to run things like the water pump, the lights, the ceiling fans, these little exhaust fans where you crank up the window and then they exhaust out, or any appliance in this RV. The circuit board is going to be a 12-volt circuit board. So if you've got a thermostat hanging on the wall, controlling the furnace and the air conditioner, that thermostat is a 12-volt thermostat talking to that 120-volt air conditioner. Now, it also is talking to that 12-volt furnace because that furnace has got a 12-volt circuit board in it, and it also has a 12-volt blower motor. Now, I want you to notice these 2 power cords that we're dealing with here. One is what we call a 30 amp, and that's the small one. I'm going to show you a picture of it here in just a minute. And the other is a 50 amp. Those of you that are looking about buying an RV that has 2 air conditioners or more, you must find the units that have the 50 amp power cord. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Now, in the top picture, this is the power cord that most travel trailers, Class C's and Class B's will have. And I want you to look at it, 3,600 watts. You say, well, what does that mean? Well, if you turn an appliance over and look at it, there is a wattage label that tells you how much power, and that's what wattage is how much power it consumes. Just, you look at your microwave. If you look at the data plate, look at that microwave, it tells you how much wattage. Now, if you have a microwave that has higher wattage, it means it's going to pop the popcorn a lot faster. It's going to cook your Marie Callender's chicken fried steak or your TV dinner, whatever it is. Higher wattage means more power. Lower power means takes it longer. The thing is, like an air conditioner, they use about 2,400 watts, so 2,400 watts to run an air conditioner. So if you take 2,400 watts away from that 3,600, that doesn't leave you much to work with. Doesn't leave you much at all. So what you've got to realize is that some of these smaller power cords that are on some of these units are going to be very limiting, and you may not be able to run the coffee pot. You may not be able to run your curling iron at the same time that you're running the air conditioner. These are things that you've got to keep in mind, because all those bells and whistles, all those features and benefits that you want are going to be driven many times by whether or not you've got the right power to power it up. Now, the other cord that the units have is what we call a 50 amp power cord, and basically we plug into the pedestal from the campground that is actually 240 volts, just like in your brick and stick home. And then I want you to keep in mind, in this RV, we do not have any 240 volt devices. We have only 120 volt devices. So basically what happens is they bring two legs of 120 volts each, and they split it. One leg handles one air conditioner, maybe the microwave, and the other leg handles the other air conditioner, and maybe the water heater, electric water heater. So you've got 12,000 watts, so much more that you can run. And so when you're looking at bells and whistles, the power cord is going to drive it. Now, using extension cords and that little adapter that you get, I want you to notice that that extension cord is only typically capable of giving you about 1,800 watts. And if an air conditioner needs 2,400, it's not going to take care of it. It will start, it will run, but what happens is that wire begins to get hot, and when it does, the insulation melts off, and next thing you know, you're putting about a $1,200 air conditioner back on the roof of your rig. So keep that in mind. Extension cords are deadly, particularly when you're running for air conditioners. Now, you use this extension cord to run some of the basic lights, keep the refrigerator on, that sort of thing, but it's not made to run the heavy stuff like the air conditioners, okay? Propane, that's the other fuel source. Now, the tank on the left, that's the one that we typically see on the motorhomes. It's bolted to the frame, but those of us that have the towable units, like the travel trailers, the fifth wheels, we're going to be using the cylinders, the little bit bigger version of the barbecue grill cylinders that we have. Now, why is it important that we know about these things? Because the cylinders, not the tank, the AS&E tank, but the cylinders, on the ones on the right, have a born date stamped on them, but they also have a date that they have to be inspected. And the first inspection comes due in 12 years here in the United States. And then after that, it's every 5 years. Now, if you're an American and you go across the Canadian border and you have a unit, let's say you have cylinders on your fifth wheel that are, say, 11 years old, and you say, well, in the United States, I still have another year before I have to get them re-inspected. You get up into Canada and go to get these cylinders filled up, they won't fill them. And so you're stuck. You've got to end up buying one of their units. Now, they're built to the same specifications in the United States as they are in Canada, but the different regulations between Canada and the U.S. is Canada is every 10 years. Here in the United States, the first one is 12 years, and then 5 years after. Now, the big motorhome tank does not require an inspection. Never let anybody tell you that it does, because I had a young man tell me, oh, if you got a motorhome, we're going to have to send that out to be inspected. And I looked at him and think, buddy, what class did you sleep through? Because quite honestly, the only thing that's going to be done when they go to fill this thing up, when you pull it up there and they hook the hoses up to it, is they're going to do a visual inspection. Make sure you haven't run over any curbs or tree stumps or anything like that, but it is not required to be recertified. LP detectors. Now, this is the thing that sniffs for gas. The reason why I'm putting this in here is that they also have a born date stamped on the back. Now, you notice this one says January 22nd of 2007, I believe it is. So this was when it was born. And so what it's telling us is that in 5 years, this thing is expired. So what happens is that these things start going off on people, and they wake them up in the middle of the night. And this is what we find all the time when we're doing inspections. Wakes people up in the middle of the night. Somebody gets up with a screwdriver, takes those two screws out, undoes it from where it's mounted underneath the cabinet or on the center of the island someplace, take a pair of wire cutters, cut the wires, put it back up there, and go back to bed. It's like taking the battery out of a smoke detector. You've just disabled it. So when you have a problem, it's not alive to tell you what's going on. Your good dealerships, the folks that are selling units and are playing it by the rules like they're supposed to, if they get a unit in that's been traded in, and if that thing's over 5 years old, they will change the LP detector, they would change the hoses on the propane system, and the regulator, because they don't want the risk, and that shows the professionalism. But there's a lot of guys out there that said, nah, you bought it as is, baby, you own it. Well, guess what? You've put your family at risk. And these are things that we find out during the inspection. whether you get an inspection or not, you need to know these things, because they say, oh, it doesn't hurt what you don't know. Oh, yeah, it does. Somebody can get hurt real bad if you don't know what you're supposed to know. Now, this is a water system. Now, this is fresh water, and please understand, we've got fresh water and we have wastewater, and I tell students in our classes, an RV is basically a miniature city. It has fresh water system, and you also have a sewer treatment plant on board. The only thing is that we don't have a treatment plant on board. We have to dispose of it. So we've got holding tanks, and you got to be careful how much you hold around, because we know what water weighs. So when you're staying at campgrounds, you need to know how to dump your tanks. And it's amazing how many times I can look out the window and I can watch, and I feel sorry for the people. And sometimes I'll go out and assist, because you can tell it's not going well. If you've ever watched that movie RV with Robin Williams, you know, it's so true. Some of the stuff, everybody's pulling up chairs and watching and making fun of, and unfortunately, that's what happens. But if somebody's shown you how, you don't have to go through that stuff. Now, on the freshwater side, we're either getting, excuse me, water from the city, or we're getting from our own board water tank. Now, a lot of folks will carry a full tank of water, but guys, what do you do when you got a 110 gallons holding tank? That's a lot of weight. So most people, and Lady Ian, our one, we typically will carry a little water in our tank. We typically don't carry any more than 1/3 of a tank, because we'll stop at roadside at parks and have lunch and do things. And sometimes we want to water mow the Wonder Weenie dog, and we want to wash our hands and go to the restroom. Well, we've got to have water on board to take care of that. Key thing I want you to notice, water comes into a water heater on the low end and discharges hot water out on the top end. Now, those of you that are going to be working on water heaters and things, you know, when you look at these things, it'll make sense, because you'll see where the water comes in, the tank heats it, and then it comes out on the top side, okay? The toilets, usually you can tell the black water toilet, you know, that's the waste toilet. That tank is typically directly below the toilet. Now, there's a few exceptions. There's some units out there that are very sophisticated, to where they have a kind of a garbage disposal that eats all of the byproduct, the waste paper and all the other, grinds it up and flushes it down a hose down to a tank at another location. But by far, most of us have the tank directly below the toilet. There's always the magic question about, okay, how do these holding tanks work? How do they give me these readings? Well, folks, water conducts electricity. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? But what they do is they bring electricity into the tank on this lower sensor, and that water conducts that electricity to that next sensor. Notice that it turns on the light at 1/3. Now, right now, 2/3 is not lit yet, because water has not come in contact with that tank. But it will as we bring water in. Now, this tank happens to be a freshwater tank. But what if it's a black water tank, or what if it's a gray water tank? Now, a lot of folks will have some problems with their tanks. Soap, toilet tissue, and things like that will get stuck on the sidewall and short out between these two and give you bad readings. And this is an ongoing thing, and these are some things that we talk about in our classes, things that we can do to remedy that problem. Here's one that you can file away. It's a trivia question. When you walk up to an RV that has an RV refrigerator, and you look at the refrigerator doors that are on the side, if it has the same refrigerator that it came from the factory with, you can tell by looking at the position of the latches whether it is a Dometic or a Norcold refrigerator. A Dometic or Norcold. And those are the two main RV refrigerators that we have in the market today. There's a new one coming in that Atwood makes. It has helium instead of the hydrogen gas, but there are by far thousands upon thousands of units that are what we call the RV absorption type refrigerators. They do not have a compressor. That's what most RV refrigerators have. They do not have compressors. They use heat to make cold. But you can just walk up and say, oh, that's a Dometic. And you say, well, how do you know? Well, the latches are pointed down. See how they are? Dometic for down, Norcold for up north. So there's your trivia to file away. Oh, let me back up. Did you know for every minute that you leave an RV refrigerator door open, it takes 1 hour for that refrigerator to recover? For every minute you're in there rooting around trying to figure out what you want to get out of there in the midnight snack that you're getting, every minute it takes it 1 hour for it to recover. Now, those of you that have the house type refrigerators that have that compressor and everything, it has a much faster recovery time. But the RV style was built for us to be able to live off the grid, run off of propane, or run off of 120 volts. So there's it's a little because it doesn't have a compressor. Now let's look at water heaters. Now this is what we call a Suburban. There's two brands, Suburban and Atwood. This happens to be the water heater brand that those that take that training triad class, the maintenance class, we'll take one of these apart, because that's part of what we do, is we do some hands-on, because it's very, very important that we learn with our hands, because we remember. We can see something, we can get a lecture, we can death by PowerPoint is what we always laugh about. But you know what? If you're over here taking it apart and putting it back together and it works, when you finish, you just learned something. Now the thing about these water heaters is the tank is much smaller than what we have in our brick and stick home, but you know what? They can up. Because both brands, if they have gas and electric heat, so they have electric heating element and they also have the propane, you can operate both functions at the same time. And so what that does is it has a faster recovery time. We have a 12-gallon on this redwood that we're living in. Lady E can take a shower, we can run a load of clothes, I can take a shower, and the water heater keeps up, which is phenomenal when you think about it. Okay, so we will be taking one of those apart, but DSI stands for direct spark ignition, and we will walk it through it, and when you finish you think, that's all there is to this thing? I'll show you some of the tips and tricks, some of the things that you push, the little buttons you push to reset certain things that trip, because we get purple monkey all over, so we get into panic mode, when really all it needs to do is have a thermostat reset by pushing a button. Roof inspection is a critical thing for us, and the reason why I say this is because of the sun beating down on it and how damaging it is to it, the slide outs, and of course now Brian will tell you about landing gear, the critical, how things need to be looked at. But once you see it, once you understand it, it makes total sense, and it's so much easier to work with it and to do your own repairs. If you can find these problems and resolve them, then you're not having to pay that big ticket. Now, this is what we call the training triad. Now, let me just, and I'm sharing this with you because the stories that I hear around the campfire, it's just enough to make you just shake your head. We started a program, and it was at the request of Workamper News, because of all the people that we have coming into the RVing experience saying, you know what, I just need to learn how this works. I see stuff on the YouTube, and some of the stuff I kind of makes sense, and some of it I don't think the guy even knows what he's talking about, and I buy this book, and what does that part look like? And what we need to do many times is get our hands on it, to see it, have somebody explain it to us, have somebody walk us through it. And so the training triad is that very thing. It's a 5-day hands-on course that we do. And this happens to be for the individuals that come in and just want to learn how to work on their own unit. The last class we did, we have several people in the class that did not even own an RV, and what they were there for, it was to learn about it so they would know what they were going to look for. And one of the ladies was telling my wife, she said, I looked at a unit and I realized real quick it was not one that we needed because it had some problems that we had talked about in class. So she said, I didn't buy it. She said, I probably would have if I had not known what I know now. And then we have people that are in the experience and they're going to work and doing some things that may be working at a campground. And so what they do is they hired because they have some more knowledge, and they can help the people in the campground fix basic things, reset circuit breakers, fix a water leak, just do little things that maybe it might take hours before you can get somebody out there to look at it. And then we've got dealerships that are hiring people that come out of this program. I was talking to one of the guys this afternoon. He was texting me. He's up in Washington State. He took a course with us, and he said, Cooper, this was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was driving a truck. Now, it's hard to imagine this guy has a degree in opera. He's an opera singer, but he's driving a truck. And like he told me, he said, I'm away from my family driving this truck because I'm gone all the time. And he said, now I'm at home with my family. He said, when I go home, I'm home. So for him, it was a good deal. And we see a lot of folks that are work campers that will maybe work at a campground, let's say in one part of the country for 4 or 5 months, and maybe they'll either work at a campground, or I've even had some of them working at dealerships. and working in the service bays, doing things there. And then when the season's over with, they say, okay, I'm leaving. And they say, well, we'll see you next year. Same time, same channel, right? Yep. And so they leave and they go someplace else. Maybe they go back home. Got some that are working at other jobs. I had one student one time that he worked at Yellowstone National Park on RVs in the summertime, and then in the winter he would go down in the valley down in southern Texas, and that's where he stayed down there. So he said, I have time in between where we stop and see the grandkids and do things, but he said, for me, this is the best of both worlds. He said, I was a meat cutter, and I said, I hated my job, hated it. But he said, now I've got something that I enjoy because I see that I'm helping people. Now we've got some people that are doing taking this course to become RV inspectors, because this is the first level. This is a level 1 inspector would take this course. When you come out of here, you can do inspections on RVs for banks, extended service agreement companies, and doing inspections maybe take you an hour, 2 hours to do. A lot of those folks are making 100, 150, 175 bucks in that hour, 2 hours that they're looking at there. So this is something that we see a lot of folks coming into. This is kind of the general RV maintenance course, and this is the website that you can go to and look at it. I'm going to encourage you to look at it, okay? Here's the dates. This is what we've got set up so far. We're leaving here, headed out to Mesa, and we're going to travel up the western seaboard, and then we're going to come down through. But long and shorter, we're adding some more classes because we keep getting the calls. Lady E had somebody reach out to her this afternoon wanting to know, where's your next class going to be? Because people are saying, you know what? If I know what's going on, I don't have the fear. If I don't have the fear, I can enjoy what I'm doing. The lifestyle is what I want to live, and I don't want to live in fear, and fear that I'm not going to have any money to pay for my stays because I spend it all on repairs. This is what we cover in the 5 days. Now, I say hands-on because, folks, that's what it is. Typically, we'll do things in the morning, and I try to get us out in the outside, because what we do is we stay in a campground. I ask you to bring your RV so that way we can work on it. Because you need to learn how to work on your unit. And now if we have somebody that comes that doesn't have an RV or couldn't bring it, we butter you up with somebody that does have a unit. And which works out real well, because sometimes it takes 2 or 3 to work on something, to locate things. But you're going to get into the electrical panel box. Now we're going to have you disconnect the power cord, make sure everything's turned off, put a bag over the power cord, put a sign on it, do not plug in, and you're going to go into that electrical panel box. You're going to tighten up things, because you would be surprised what we're finding. When we did that class down in New Brunswick, we had one gentleman had a 50-amp circuit breaker that the wire, he could not tighten it up. So what he had is the circuit breaker was arcing across to the wiring. Folks, that's how fires get started. And so by finding these things, finding out if it's got a hot skin, so if you get a hold of the door handle, it doesn't shock you. I mean, it's amazing how many times somebody's gotten in there and worked on things, or maybe somebody's run a screw through a wire, and we short it out, and so get a hold of that door handle, and it lights you up, We'll do propane. I'm going to show you how to do a leak test. I'm going to show you, you can take what we call a manometer. It's a gas tester. Hook it up to propane. You can find out if you've got a gas leak. And folks, I don't know that we've ever had a class that we haven't found some gas leaks. We haven't found some electrical issues. It's that prevalent. It really is. Water systems, we'll talk about it. We'll go through it. We'll look at some things. Many times we can't get to the water tanks because they're buried in the bellies. But once we understand how you bring in the water, how you dispose of it, fear goes away. Then we're going to look at appliances. Water heaters, furnaces, air conditioners, refrigerators. I'm going to walk you through how they work, the refrigeration flow for the air conditioners and the refrigerators, what the test points are, what you can do to extend the life of these things, servicing that you can do. Because, folks, I promise you, you can take a 5-gallon bucket and sit down on it in about 45 minutes, do the service and maintenance on a water heater and furnace. 45 minutes for the water heater, 45 minutes for the furnace, and save yourself the service call, or save yourself taking into the shop. These dealerships can do the work for you, but they're so covered up, they don't have time many times to get to you. And to have to wait 6 to 8 weeks is just not going to work for our schedules. Then we'll talk about the exterior systems. There's some things about maintenance that we need to know about. Just like we were talking about these awnings, things that we need to do and things we don't need to do. Okay, so we're going to go through that in that 5 days. but it's hands-on, and that's the key, hands-on. Also, I'm going to show you how to use a bolt-on meter so you can check for electricity. Once you know how to use that tool, that's your test tool for checking those 3 electrical systems. Now, here's the cost for the course. This is for the 5 full days, and I promise you, when you leave on Friday, or the 5th day, you are going to be a tired puppy. I promise you, because the days start early, because Mr. Anderson will come in and do some business training, because we have many of you that are saying, you know what, maybe I need to think about starting a business so that way I can write off some expenses and I can figure out how I can make money on the road and live this experience. And so he's going to coach you through some things. He's going to introduce you to an attorney and accountant that can walk you through some things. He's going to show you some things that will help you. I'm just telling you, I came into this experience when I first met Mr. Anderson, and I had Mobile RV Academy set up as a sole proprietor because that was the cheapest way to get a business started. And I was paying Uncle Sam out the wazoo for taxes. And Steve told me, he said, Cooper, let me introduce you to a man. His man's name is Mark Kohler. And Kohler and Lady E and I had a conversation. And Kohler told me, he said, Cooper, you've got to give me something to work with. He said, we've got to change your entity from a sole proprietor to at least an LLC. And he said, when you do that, you change the whole tax structure that you are taxed on. Folks, one year I was paying $4,500 in because I hadn't paid enough for taxes. To the next year, I got $4,500 back. So basically, you know, we're looking at about a $9,000 gain, all because it wasn't that I made any more money. And it was all because he showed me how you could do certain things and how my structure had changed, and now I could take advantage of the tax laws that we have in this country. And so when somebody shows you those tricks, it makes a world of difference, okay? Now, to register for this course is rvtechcourse.com. Plain and simple. You can do it all in one payment on a credit card, or you can do a 3-pay. All we ask is that you just have it paid for before you start class. Now, with that being said, let me just say this to you. We're looking for inspectors. Folks, we need about 1,800 inspectors right now across the country. And we're, I'm going to say, not quite a third there. We've had to turn away some business because we didn't have any. We've got some areas that we've got plenty of inspectors, and maybe there's not enough business. We have other areas we don't have any inspectors. But what we're finding, those people that travel and are willing to maybe, okay, well, I'm going to be down here this winter, and then I'm going to be up here. As they're moving around, they can do things. Win Semler picked up an inspection as he was on his way down south, and took a little detour and did an inspection, made a few dollars, and went on his way. But here's what I want to share with you. If you register for this 5-day course, once you finish that, let me back up and say this way. When you register for this 5-day course, we've got a bonus called a Rapid Start. And what we're going to do is we're going to give you access to the online material. I've got this course already recorded, so that way you can go in and start it. We've had several people come in and say, look, it gave me a jump start, so when I got to class, it made more sense to me. It's kind of like a review when we got here to the class. So we give you immediate access to the Rapid Start. So you can take the online, you see the videos, you take the little quizzes. So that's available to you. And that is available to you for the next year. So even after you finish this 5-day course, you can come back and review that material over and over and over. Now in the 5-day class, you get a chance to do what we call a do-over. In the next year, you can come back and take that class again, as long as I've got room in it. And thus far, we've always had it. We can squeeze one more in there. It gets a little tight sometimes, but all we ask is bring your books, bring your tools, and be willing to help some of the new ones that are coming along. So what we're saying is this 5-day class has so much more with it than just taking the class and then you go home, adios amigo, because you have a chance to come back and review online or come back and do the course over again. And like Brian and Wynn both said, both of them called me. And guys, I believe very firmly that relationships are built and we're here to help one another. And so a lot of times what will happen is I'll get a phone call from one of you guys. As soon as I get out of class, I'll try to get a hold of you and help you, because I can say, hey, have you checked this? Have you checked that? Because many times that's all we need is somebody to give us a little prompting to help us get us going. Now, if you just want to do the online, And that's all you want to do. You want to get that material, get that knowledge, and here again, you have access to it for 1 year. You can take it by going to nrvia.org. Now, that will cost you $499. In both of these situations, you will come out with your level 1 inspector. So that way you can do work for insurance companies, extended service agreement companies, and banks. Where their NRVIA has on their front website, if you want to go and look, locate an inspector. What you do is you go sign up, put where your address is, where you're located. When people key in, and this is what a lot of inspectors do, is they get business because their name is listed in that location. So with that being said, Mr. Anderson, is there anything that's popped up that we've been zipping along here that we need to cover?
You have done a fabulous job, Mr. Cooper. I have fielded all the questions that have come in. You did such a great job. We haven't had too many questions asked. I guess we'll do a last call for questions. If you have some, please feel free to type those in. We'll be glad to address those. I did share with the folks in the chat window that on one of these slides, the address for the tech course was cut off, but I'm glad that you have it here. It's rvtechcourse.com, and we want to make sure that they have that so they can get registered for one of the future courses.
Mm-hmm. But like I say, folks, if you want to become an inspector, here's an opportunity for you. Now, not everybody says, hey, I want to be an inspector, but come and learn to get the fear out of the way. And then if you say, well, you know, I'm just buying an RV, I don't really care. Well, if you're buying used, please get an inspection, because I'm telling you, there's things that we're finding that it's just, you know, and it'll come out in these reports, and it'll help you make a good decision, because that's what you want. You don't want to be buying a money pit. Knowledge is what makes that fear go away, kicks that purple monkey to the curb, and that's what we want. I mean, that's what Brian and Wynn did. You know, they took this class, and that's why they were able to step back and say, okay, I can do this. And, you know, whether it be, you know, like Brian went ahead and did the replacement on his own, or Wynn looked at it and says, I can diagnose it, but you know what? I can't get it to reset, so I know that this is that 20%. I got to have some help with this one. But at least he knew what he had, and that's, I don't know about you, I can sleep better at night if I just at least know what's going on. And that's what we want to do, is we want to help you.
All right, Mr. Cooper, a couple questions have come in. This is from Arlene. She's asking, earlier in the training, there's a list of 3 things that you mentioned to have done when buying a used RV. If you could repeat those. She says, what are they, such as getting an RV inspection, fluid analysis? She has a question mark on what the third one was.
All right, can I back up? Let's go back to it, because I want to make sure I don't misquote myself here. And well, we are going way back, and I'm glad she's asking so we can cover ourselves. So bear with me. Get an inspection. Let's see. I think we want to back up.
There you are, I believe.
And look at the extended services. Yeah. Is this the one? I think this is the one she's talking about. Is that correct, Arlene?
I think that's the case.
Okay. And like I say, the fluid analysis, folks. I think I even saw Tom Johnson online here tonight, and he was available if we needed to bring him online. But folks, I'm just telling you, if the military does it on their aircraft, if industry does it so that way they can extend their oil changes, and they want to know, okay, this engine's breaking down, and they don't want to have problems in the middle of production or middle of some guy driving across country with a truck, they can head this problem off and do it at their convenience. And so you need to know what's going on the inside of that unit. Now, Tom tells me that not only do we need to get the oil analysis, but he said he can tell you so much more about that engine if you can get him a coolant sample too. Because he can tell you if that engine's got hot. He can tell you if maybe the gaskets are leaking, and maybe it wouldn't show up in the oil, but it'll show up in that coolant. Now, he also tells us that, you know, if you're going to do a fluid analysis, you've got to make sure that you've got at least 1,000 miles on that oil, which, I mean, kind of makes sense when you think about it, because that oil's had a chance to circulate and pick up that material and bring it back. So now when he sends it through his labs, because they've got 3 labs across the country, when they send it through that lab, it tells them what metal's floating around in there, what's the condition of that oil. So it's like our blood test. And those of you folks, take a serious look at these extended service agreements. Now, just understand, it is not a bumper to bumper. not by any stretch of the imagination. But there are good extended service agreements, and there's some that are not even worth the paper they're written on. So do your due diligence. I know there's some guys out there advertising on the internet, and I look at them, I just shake my head. And then there's some others that are advertising there, and some are pretty decent. But get a copy of it, what they cover, so that way you know what you're going to have to put out of pocket, how much your deductible is. So, okay,
All right, good job.
we'll move on.
Yeah, if you'd move back to the screen where you showed the 3 electrical systems right there, back up. I had a couple people ask if you could put that one back up for just a moment on the 3 electrical systems.
Okay.
And maybe just review that real quick again.
Okay. All right, so you've got your power cord. Now, this is what plugs into what we call the shore power, the pedestal at the RV park. You're either going to have the 3-prong or you're going to have the 4-prong. The 3-prong, of course, is 30 amps. The 4-prong is 50. Power comes into the circuit breaker panel box. From there, we distribute it out. Now, we have the same appliances that we have in our brick and stick home. Same. The only difference is now we send some of it over to that charger, that battery charger. Now, the reason why we have a house-type battery in this RV is that this converter can run the basic things, lights, water pumps, and things like that. But what if you're running your slides to move your walls out in your RV or your landing legs? It pulls more power than that converter charger can give you. So what it does is it pulls from the reservoir called the deep cycle battery. And that deep cycle battery, there's some things there we need to talk about, and we go quite a bit of detail in that in class. How do you maintain it? How should it be hooked up? What are you looking for? And it just, a little maintenance goes a long ways with these batteries. They just need a little maintenance to take care of them. But that battery is our piggy bank, because when we need it, because that converter can't keep up, we backfeed out of that battery into that fuse panel to supply, the big items, like I said, the slide outs and the landing legs.
All right, good job, Mr. Cooper. Also had individual, Charlene ask, do you offer classes for people that do not have RVs yet? I know a lot of these are at RV campsites, and I don't have an RV yet, would have to camp in a tent. And I can share with Charlene that, many of the locations where these courses are held, many of them have housing in the form of the smaller park models that they may rent out, or a lot of the folks have stayed in nearby motels, or yes, we've had folks do the tent game, that's for sure.
No doubt. And do not be afraid, because you say, well, maybe I don't need to come till I get my RV. Trust me, what you'll learn here is probably going to save you. Because you're going to be homing in on a unit, and if you've got a little knowledge to bring to the table, you'll see things from a different perspective. I always joke with everybody in class and say, I'm going to ruin you this week. You are going to be, and guys that are online that are salesmen, I'm sorry, don't mean to hurt your feelings, but you are going to be a salesman's worst nightmare, because you're going to come up and you're going to see right through when one's not telling you the truth. Because you're going to think to yourself, he's a nice-looking guy, he's trying to make a living for his family, but he doesn't know his product. And so he's just buffaloing me on this thing. Because if you've got knowledge, then you can make good decisions. And, I mean, it's that way in everything we do in our life. And buying an RV, operating an RV, and maintaining one is no different. Knowledge is king. Knowledge makes the fear go away.
All right, we had from Tom Johnson with JG Lubricants has been on with us this evening, and he wanted to make sure that we made folks aware that they can go to lubricantservices.com. I'll type it in the chat box so that you have the correct URL, that you can go there to learn more about fluid sampling, and it's something that he firmly believes in, so do we, and this is something you should be doing in your car engines and not just RVs, so check that out. I'll put the address in the chat box and it'll show up on your window also. Let's see, a couple more questions came in here, Coop. I know we're going a little long in the tooth, but the questions are coming in, so we'll make sure we get them answered. Let's see. Donna Lynn asks, why aren't there solar options offered for RVs?
There are some that you will see that they will put a solar panel on top of the air conditioner, and it's just a trickle charger. More and more of the manufacturers are going ahead and pre-wiring, so that way you can add solar. So, you know, that is an option. But I'll tell you, most of the manufacturers haven't gotten that progressive. They really haven't. And part of it, I think, is they look at the cost of what it takes to put those panels on there. There is a guy out of Oregon that as we travel up this summer, I want to go by and visit. It's a company called AM Solar, you know, like AM radio, AM Solar. And if you get a chance, go check those guys out. They seem to be probably one of the best that I've seen. There's several companies that are doing this, but I'm more interested when I'm talking to somebody at an RV show. You know, they've got all these solar panels laid out there and everything, and I'll ask the question, well, what's your background? What do you do? Oh, I'm an engineer. Do you have an RV? And when they say no, it's kind of like, credibility. And then and I say, well, how do you know the system works? Well, I designed it. I know it'll work. Well, I hate to say this, but that's not always the case. So take a look at somebody like an AM Solar, and I understand that they've got a class that they will have you come through, and some of them, I think they even have some opportunities for folks that want to be solar installers. Don't know the guys, don't know anything about them other than what I've read, and I've seen some really good reviews on them. And like I say, I plan on stopping by and visiting them because I think solar is the way we're going to be going. It really is.
All right, Mr. Cooper, if you could back the slides up, Sandra would like to see where the seminars are again. So the slide that you had, the locations, is what she was looking for there. And while you're getting to that one, I'll also share, I've been asked, a couple of folks have asked, is the webinar available to be watched again? And yes, as soon as we finish this evening, I will parse it and take the recording and actually upload it to YouTube. And you'll have an email that'll come out of the GoToMeeting system that'll probably be in your inbox in the morning, and it will have the link on it so that you can watch it again and stop it, look at the slides, etc. And we also encourage you to share it with someone. Share it with another RVer, share it with a loved one, and help them understand, you know, why this would be a good idea for you or for them to gain the additional knowledge. All right, going down, got a few more questions coming through. Also, okay, just maybe move it forward to the, well, I'll just tell, they're asking about the cost of the course. It's $1644 single pay. If you want to do a 3 payment, you can do $594 in 3 different payments, a payment per month. You just have to have the course paid for by the first day of the course. Another question that came in from Byron says, as a weekend RVer, should an RV be parked undercover when we're not in use, or do you recommend the RV approved? Let's see, recommend the RV be probably approved by a cloth cover, or be covered by an approved cloth cover is what he meant.
You know, this is just, and please understand, what I'm going to share with you is just from what I have seen and what I've observed as a master tech. I've been a service manager. I've also been a director of service operation for a company that had 8 stores, RV stores. So you see a lot of things come through, and you shake your head and you look at it and think, well, that was a good idea, and the others, that wasn't so good. If you can, you know, it will extend the life of the roof, and it will certainly extend the life of the tires and things if you can get that thing under cover. It just, you know, getting that sun off of it just helps it so much. Now, there's some folks that will put these covers over them, and the thing is that there's good ones and there's bad ones. If it's not a custom fit, what happens many times is the wind gets to blowing and we're not there, and so we're gone for 30 days or so, and then when we come over here, all of a sudden we get over there and we find out that we've rubbed a hole in the cover, and not only that, but we've rubbed the paint completely down to the bare material, which is fiberglass or sheet metal. I mean, I saw a guy one time that had a blue polytarp over that thing, and when he took it off, it looked like somebody took sandpaper and rubbed all over that thing. And so when you start seeing that, it makes you realize that, yeah, you want to protect it, but you got to have the right protection. So ideally, the best is undercover. If you can't get that, then, like you say, a good cloth that actually is made to fit that shape and size.
All right, Mr. Cooper, Charlene's asking, what different classes and levels do you offer? I know you have the maintenance, but do you offer something beyond that, more advanced?
We do. we've got a couple of different tracks we can go. Let's say that you came and you spent this first week with us. We're then going to introduce you to an opportunity to go to become what we call a level 2 inspector. Now, a level 2 inspector is taught by some folks that we have. I mean, I can teach it, but what I find is I'm tied up doing typically the level 1 instruction, and we have these managers that teach what we call a learn by doing. It's another 5-day class, and what you do is you go here again at a campground or at a dealership that's hosting us, and you actually will scope an RV to find out exactly how to inspect it from the roof all the way down to the running gear, what to do on the inside. You have scope sheets so you don't miss anything. Then we teach you how to use the proprietary software that we have, because we've had to write some software, because when we got into this 2 years ago, we did not have the software that it took to do the reports. So we found a group of folks that worked with us, created this thing. Let me just tell you, I about pulled my hair out trying to get the software put together, but it's done. And the report that's generated is something that, you know, a motorhome this report might be 75 to maybe almost 100 pages, but spelling out specific things in this thing. So the learn by doing is the next level. Now, I do a lot of dealer technician training, and we'll be offering some of the dealer type technician training at a later date through Workamper News, because we're going to be opening up some classes through the Workamper University. In many of our classes, you will have not only consumers, folks that want to become RV inspectors, campground technicians, but we will also have RV dealerships have sent some of their technicians to us. And we're sending them through, and this course is the same material that we use in what we call the apprenticeship program, to teach that young man, that young lady, the basics. And then I come back to the dealership and we do advanced troubleshooting, showing them how to chase electrical issues, how to work on appliances, and how to troubleshoot. And then I do a third level with the dealers, and it's very specific on the brands. Here's how you troubleshoot an Atwood water heater. Take it apart, put it back together. It's very, very hands-on. That's usually for more of your technical types. So what we typically see is in the consumer, people like you and I, we will take this triad course because it gives us such a good solid foundation. And then what happens is you build on it, because when you get that fear out of the way and you get your confidence up, then you're not afraid to tackle something. You're not willing to back up. You'll jump in and think, I can fix this. I understand how this works. And then those of you that want to do the level 2 inspections, and this is the inspection that we're doing for individuals, you know, full-fledged, someone's looking to buy it. We even do what we call certified pre-owned inspections for dealerships, where we're inspecting the dealer's used units, just like you have certified pre-owned in the car dealership. So my recommendation would be is to take a look at the triad, this 5-day class, and then if you want to go further, the next level, go and take the learn by doing, because there's a lot of hands-on involved with it as well.
Well, Mr. Cooper, you have been a trooper. We got one last question, and we'll close with this question. This is from Tim. When looking at fifth wheels, is a welded aluminum frame better, or the screwed joint like a DRV has better?
Boy, that's the million-dollar question, because not only do you have the joint, whether it's welded or screwed, but there's other things that are holding it together. Now, I know the construction of DRV, and I can tell you right now, it stands tall. It really does, because when you look at how they build that thing and the material they're hanging on the outside, they glue it on. I mean, like, it is solid bonded, because if you need to take that outside wall off, you out there with a grinder grinding that panel off, because it's not coming loose. The reason why you see them doing the aluminum weld, because they tack it up, because it gives it structure, so that way it gives that bonded laminated wall rigidity. I wish every manufacturer would screw those studs together. It's kind of like building a house, you know. I wish they would. But when you look at that DRV unit versus some of the other units out there, you can see why DRV charges the price they do, and you can see why they get the reputation they do, as opposed to some guy who's selling a unit that maybe only costs, say, $50,000. So I know that's a long way around it. I admire what Suites and the DRV guys are doing because I've been through their plant. I see how they do it. And having worked in a production plant, I appreciate the quality that those guys put into those units, and they're well built. So I don't know if you own one or not, or you're looking at it. It's used. You know, here again, get somebody to look at it for you. But you know, usually if you can get a good used one, you've got something to work with. You really do.
Well, all right, Mr. Cooper, you went a solid 2 hours. I congratulate you. You provide a lot of great information. You've had a lot of kudos come in, and I'll just pass those on to you as many thanks from many folks that were on here. And we had a lot of people hang in there with us for the entire 2 hours, and that was really phenomenal. Again, the recording will be available. It'll be in an email that will come to you from the GoToMeeting tool. It should be in your inbox by tomorrow morning. And we want to thank you for joining us. We hope you will join us for one of the Triad courses. We look forward to seeing you down the road out there in the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And Wynn and Brian, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I appreciate you being here and participating. And folks, come join us. If you'll come, I promise we'll give you the best that we've got because, hey, this is what the RV experience is all about. So I bid you well, and I hope to see you in class.
Good night,
Talk to you later. Bye-bye now. Good night.